HCHB is proud to sponsor the Last Visit First podcast, which explores the complex issues faced by today's home health and hospice providers.
In the spotlight today, Chief Revenue Officer Hannah Pearson, explaining how HCHB uses technology to connect people.
One of my favorite phrases is relationship architect. The focus is about the client and building the right community, the right fabric of community around our customers, making sure that from the very bottom to the very top, they had a resource and a contact to reach out to with any problems, and that we could connect them quickly and expeditiously to the right resource. That's where the client success team was born, and we touch people at every level of the organization.
All right, welcome back to the Last Visit First podcast. Today, I'm really excited to host these two incredible leaders. Dr. Andy Mayo is the Chief Medical Officer at St. Croix Hospice. He's a dear friend of mine. He was an investor in Muse with me. He helped us create Muse back in the day. A lot of the ideas that came out of Muse were Dr. Mayo's, and he manages a lot of patients, and he's going to let us we'll let him talk about that. And then joined also is Dr. Tiffany Richter. She's a Chief Medical Officer at Agape Care out of South Carolina and Georgia, and they're in a bunch of other states, and we'll hear about that. But I've known Dr. Richter for quite a while too, and super excited. Agape Care has a really nice pediatric hospice, pediatric palliative care, as well as a lot of inpatient hospices, which sets them apart, makes them a little bit different. And so we're going to hear about that from them. Welcome, both of you. Thank you for joining us today on the call.
Well, thanks for having us, Tom.
For sure. Well, let's start off. We'll start with Dr. Richter. Tell us your story. How'd you get to hospice? How'd you get to Agape Care? Where'd you go to med school? Tell us about you.
Sure. So I am born and raised in South Florida in Fort Lauderdale, and did medical school there and did my medical training in Broward County, Florida. I'm a family medicine physician, but I always say by training only, because after residency, I did a fellowship in hospice and palliative care and have practiced only in this space since then. I have worked in every aspect of hospice and palliative care, inpatient palliative care programs in Florida, California, South Carolina. I started an outpatient clinic for a few years in a cancer center, outpatient palliative care, home visit programs, multiple hospices, home hospice. I ran an inpatient unit for several years. The thing about my journey is that, I'd never really, my fellowship program had all of hospice and palliative care. We saw the inpatients, and then we saw them in our clinic, and then we saw them in the home, and then we saw them on hospice, and then we saw them in the inpatient unit. And I never found a role in the world outside of fellowship that encompassed all of it. And so I'm really excited to be with Agape Care now that we have all of it. I started with Agape Care Group 4 years ago, to start an outpatient palliative care program in the state of South Carolina for them, just me and my laptop day one. And now we have a palliative care program across the state of South Carolina and up into North Carolina. And a year into my time with Agape Care, they asked me to join at a larger level. And so my role at Agape Care is both to help with the medical staff, so the physicians and the nurse practitioners. I also have our quality department, so all of our QA and quality team, our triage department, and all of our palliative care teams.
That's wow. Dr. Richter, you only look like you're 25 years old. I don't know how you keep saying all these years.
Well, I do appreciate
it. Tell us your story, Dr. Mayo. I know it's a great one. I've heard it and I love it, and I can't wait for everybody to hear it out here.
Well, I was born and raised in Minnesota, and I have some medical history in my background. My great-great-grandfather came over from Manchester, England, and ended up hanging his shingle in Le Sueur, Minnesota. And his two sons, Will and Charlie, went on to start the Mayo Clinic down in Rochester, Minnesota. And so growing up, I had this history. My father's a physician. My grandfather was a physician. So 5th generation in medicine. And grew up hearing the stories that my dad would tell, certainly in a HIPAA-compliant manner, about the people that he saw in clinic. And it really sparked my interest in medicine. And in college, I went to St. Olaf College in Minnesota, and there kind of questioned, do I really want to go into medicine? But when I thought about it, medicine really pulls in the art, the social, the science, and is really a renaissance profession. And so all those other things that I was interested in were really combined in medicine. So I too ended up going to medical school at the University of Minnesota Duluth and University of Minnesota. At that time, it was a combined program, but really focused on primary care. And listening to the stories that my father had told and really drew me into that aspect. So I ended up practicing in St. Croix Falls, Wisconsin for 18 years and doing the full spectrum of care, clinic, hospital, nursing home, delivering babies, working the emergency department. And then one day I was asked to help out in hospice. And so on my days off, I would go to St. Croix Hospice and participate in the interdisciplinary care team meeting, and then go out to people's homes and do face-to-faces. And sitting around that that the IDT started making connections in my brain. What really made the Mayo Clinic great wasn't because they were particularly good surgeons. They were fine surgeons, Will and Charlie, but it was the fact that they recognized that it took a team to fully care for a patient. So this multidisciplinary approach to care. And as I was sitting around the IDT table, I started making that correlation. And what hospice does great is working as an interdisciplinary team, taking care of all aspects of a person. As the body dwindles, that spiritual and social part of the person needs caring for too, and that multidisciplinary team really comes into play in caring for the person as a whole. And it really struck a chord for me. So I worked as a hospice physician for about 2 years, and Heath Bartness met with me. He's the CEO of St. Croix Hospice, and he said, Dr. Mayo, we've reached a size of 300 patients. We need a full-time medical director. Would you join us as our chief medical officer? And I had envisioned myself as my great-great-grandfather, this small town doctor that would, someday be delivering the kids of the kids that he delivered. And I went home, and my wife said, Andy, when your day is done at hospice, your glass is full. If you don't take this job, I'm leaving. And of course, I hope she was kidding. So I hope. And but anyways, I decided to come on full time with St. Croix Hospice, and boy, what a blessing it's been to work in hospice. It's a pioneering field still, and even though it's been around since the 70s, it's we have a lot of work to do in making it a full-time part of the spectrum of care that's readily recognized and utilized. So.
Yeah, for sure. That's great. Thank you for sharing that. It's a cool story. And Dr. Mayo is absolutely celebrity status when he walks into the Mayo Clinic. Everybody, he's got the coolest last name. So yeah, I tell people I'm with Mayo, they always ask me if you're part of Mayo. And I'm like, yeah, he's the real Mayo.
The funny thing is every time I go into Mayo, they ask me, how do I spell my last name?
That is funny. It's funny. All right. Brag about your companies. Dr. Richter, tell us about Agape Care. How big are you? What are you doing now? I mean, I know a lot of the stats, and I'm blown away by both of these organizations and how fast they grew. So tell us what you're doing nowadays.
Sure. By the time this podcast airs, it'll probably be alive. But so we are a company based out of Spartanburg, South Carolina, which is in the beautiful upstate of South Carolina. We see patients across the entire spectrum of end-of-life continuum. We are currently in 10 states, so we extend from South Carolina all the way out to Oklahoma currently, and see patients as adult palliative care, Hospice at home. We have 4 inpatient hospice units. We also have a large pediatric palliative care program, which is incredibly special, called Hands of Hope, and they're in South Carolina, some North Carolina, and Georgia. They do pediatric palliative care and concurrent hospice. And so, we pride ourselves on being a really good hospice organization. We don't have primary care programs. We don't have home health. We want to be really, the gold standard for end of life care. And, we believe in having a really big umbrella to take care of patients that are suffering from serious illness. One of the directions I hope hospice goes in one day is a longer runway into hospice. I think the benefit is amazing, obviously, but I think it needs some updating. Patients don't look the way that they look anymore. They don't die the way that they did in the 70s anymore. And so, hospice patients tend to go 90 miles an hour, smash into hospice and end up on hospice. But we need a softer runway for that. And palliative care is a great way to do that, but obviously leaves also a lot to be desired in sustainability of programs and reimbursement and how to do it and get paid to do it and have staff to do it. And company on the outside, that's what it looks like. But the thing that has impressed me the most being part of Agape Care from the inside it is just how grounded our leadership team is. And we pride ourselves on being a big company with really small company feel. And we have a really down-to-earth leadership team. Everybody rolls up their sleeves and gets involved. They're on the road. They're close to the staff. And it just makes them very quality focused and driven. And I don't think I could be part of an organization that wasn't. And so, from the inside, to me, that's what makes Agape Care different from other companies.
That's awesome. All right, Dr. Mayo, tell us about St. Croix Hospice. And no, guys, this is not St. Croix, the island. There's a river that runs between Wisconsin and Minnesota. When I first heard it, too, I was like, man, I want to go to work at St. Croix Hospice to go to the island.
Yeah. Well, St. Croix Hospice, we focus solely on hospice. That's all we do. We don't do any of the palliative component other than, what hospice is palliative to a degree. But we're kind of mirrored to Dr. Richter's organization in the sense that we serve 10 states as well, but just in a cooler climate. So all the 10 Midwestern states is where we're located. And we serve, anywhere from 20 to 25,000 patients a year. And really focusing just on that hospice aspect. And I think that focus for us allows us to really bring in different programs in relation to hospice care. We have, congestive heart failure program. We have Alzheimer's programs and voyage vigil programs that we can talk about later as well. But yeah, we've grown tremendously, and of course that's a challenge. But I think we've been doing it pretty successfully. And I think, the big thing is, like Dr. Richter was saying, is the people that I work with throughout the organization, and really, again, going back to that team concept, whether a person's working in administration, finance, or any aspect of the company, those are all part of the things that make it possible to provide the best care. And my great-grandfather always said, the best interest of the patient is the only interest to be considered. And certainly that's a challenge, when you're dealing with a company and you're dealing with finances and things like that. But truly, that's what the focus is in the organization, and it permeates down from the administration in through the clinical staff and shows up in the care that we deliver. And I'm really honored to be a part of that program.
Yeah, that's cool. That's really cool. All right, let's talk a little bit about, so a lot of the hospices that we work with across the country have contracted hospice physicians. Everybody has a chief medical officer that's, been a name, but a lot of times they're just contractors versus full-time employees of the hospice. Any thoughts around positives or negatives around that? And is that an area that you guys, and you guys are all responsible for training all the other doctors. So how do you manage a contracted doctor who's still practicing as a physician versus a full-time hospice physician? And is there a balance? And do you like one side or the other? Let's start with Dr. Richter.
Sure. You've already heard me talk about this on a panel, so some of my feelings on it already. Um, there are not enough palliative care and hospice trained physicians, period, for every hospice in the country to have full-time, board certified, dedicated physicians. And so one, staffing shortage, leads to the staffing model. The other part is it's really difficult to staff with full-time physicians for coverage, right? So hospice, and I've worked as a full-time hospice physician, both in home hospice and in an inpatient unit. And the thing that appears great on paper is you think, great, I'll do this and I make this salary and it'll be great. The problem is that these programs run 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Hospice doesn't close. It doesn't go home. You don't get to turn your phone off. And so, one full-time physician isn't one full-time physician. It's one full-time physician and 4 other contracted physicians to cover vacations and nighttime and weekends. And so that's just a difficult business model to staff financially, even if there were, this large pool of trained physicians who wanted to do this work full time. So that leaves us in the situation of how do we staff? Because one, regulation, you need a physician in order to do hospice care. And 2, the physician is, one of the most important parts of hospice care, not just to certify the patient, but to drive, quality hospice care. And so our model is exactly what you said. We are a company of contracted physicians, all who can give us varying, degrees of their time. Some of them have full-time practices. Some of them have less than full-time practices. Some of them work for us full-time, but, contracted. And so it's a bell curve, right? Some of them have lots of experience in training. Some of them come and really are looking to make some easy money. And then there's all the people in the middle, which is the majority, where they want to do great work and hospice work feeds their soul and they don't know how to do it. And so they need support and training. And so, that's the challenge, is how do you keep them engaged? That's something that we work on every day. I will say that being at the elbow with them is probably the only way to make that work. There's no way to engage contracted, physicians remotely and virtually and all the ways that we engage other employees. So it does take a lot of traveling and being with them and educating them. And so we have actually just moved towards a model of regional hospice physicians. It was just myself for a long time, but when I started in this role, we were in 2 states and now we're in 10 states. And so that gets to be a little bit difficult, but we will have 3 regional physicians as of December the 9th in their seats to really be able to focus full time on being in front of the doctors and making sure that 100% of our doctors are here for the right reasons and have the tools that they need to provide quality work for the patients. So we're excited about that.
And I don't think you can buy a book on, I bet you are. You can't buy a book on this. There's no playbook. There's no SOP for that. I mean, there's materials out there, but you're essentially building it, right? I mean, there's not here's how you be a hospice physician in this, in a hospice area. Here's how you be a regional director. So
from my take, the things that we look for in a hospice physician, they have to, 1, believe in hospice, right? Because not all physicians do. It's not a given. 2, right. They have to have the competency to do the work, and that I can teach. That's easy. And then 3, they have to have the time to do the job. And that's harder to find than you would think it is. I'll let Dr. Mayer.
Yeah, so I think we're dealing with the exact same type of situation, and as we grow, I think that regional medical director is an area that we've been working on developing and expanding. I think we're up to 9 full-time physicians within our organization at this point in time. And, I think the real positive thing about that is, the ability to have sort of unified standards that we create, and a unified culture that we try to create at St. Croix. And having the regional physicians really helps as we expand distance and territory. Um, Having those regional medical directors really helps in imbuing culture and standards throughout the organization. On the other hand, I think that the local physicians, the contracted physicians, are really important because they also imbue a certain local flavor to each of the branches, and that micro culture is also really important for the satisfaction of the people working in the community, and knowledge of those individual communities and relationships within the communities. I think is also very important to stay aware of. And so I think that combination of regional and contracted physicians. And now, the other thing that is happening as well, of course, is the advanced nurse practitioners. And how do they incorporate into the fold of providing care for our hospice patients? So I think it's going to be a mosaic of how we provide care.
Hello, I'm Jennifer Maxwell, co-founder and CEO of Maxwell Tech. Here at Maxwell Tech, we believe that no family should ever feel forgotten after that last visit. Too often, grief leaves families feeling isolated. That's why we here at Maxwell Tech created Nana Connect Bereave, a simple yet powerful way for care organizations to extend compassion beyond the bedside. Bereave really does deliver timely, personalized messages that bring comfort and connection when families need it most. Our largest hospice partners are sending out over 10,000 messages a month. That means that over 19,000 family members are being connected to their care teams in meaningful ways. And the results are extraordinary. Engagement scores are running between 30 and 40%. Families love being supported in this manner, and the results are seen in their engagement. Bereave is already touching millions of lives today, and we are just getting started. If your organization is ready to bring humanity and healing into bereavement care at this scale, please visit us at maxwelltech.com.
That's good. Really good. Let's talk a little bit about HOPE and the standardized assessments and stuff that just got rolled out. Positive, negative, how's the team responded to that? And then as a person attending or a doctor attending the IDT, how is that helping or hurting, or is it causing more time in IDT, or is it making it easier in IDT? What are you guys thinking about around the HOPE assessments and how that all just got rolled out?
We're excited about HOPE. I think it just drives quality, right? It sort of forces your hand to do the right thing and prompts the visits that need to be made. And I don't know that I've seen an impact on, IDT yet. But I think that the symptom management will improve, the satisfaction will improve. It was an administrative lift to get it off the ground and make sure that we had all of the puzzle pieces in place to make good on it. But now that that's done, I'm excited about it. I think it's a change.
What do you think, Mayo?
Yeah, I agree. I think that, driving, one of the big components of HOPE is symptom management. And so being focused on that component and being able to palliate symptoms more rapidly, because that's the assessment is how rapid are you getting symptoms under control. And some of the things that we've done in terms of HOPE, we've introduced the Macy catheter into our repertoire of treatments that we and boy, the impact that has on rapidly controlling symptoms in those patients that are having difficulty controlling or can't take things orally has been truly amazing. And it's really affecting how I practice hospice. And I know Dr. Hoberman, one of our other physicians, is also a champion of that device. and it's kind of rare that, in hospice where you have, in terms of technology, which Tom, you've certainly been involved in, but to have a medical device that can impact how we practice and potentially change things significantly is truly novel and a rare occurrence. We've been using morphine and methadone and sort of the standard treatments, which are great and wonderful, but to have something new that can raise the bar and the level of care is impactful.
That's cool. Let's talk about something I've been fighting for a while, and I've been studying this, and I've talked to multiple doctors and CMS and everybody. But so if a patient is an ESRD patient, end-stage renal disease patient, and they want to continue their dialysis, they can't go on to hospice. It's not covered under that. And when we look at patients in the home health sector, especially in the Metalogics products that we look at, or in the Maxwell, as we're doing consulting out there, these are the worst patients, right? They're the sickest of the sick, COPD, diabetic. They have all kinds of problems, and they have ESRD or end-stage renal disease, and they're on dialysis. Why do you guys have an opinion of why the government can't figure this out? Like, these are the patients that belong on hospice, but they're suffering and dying on home health because no doctor's going to tell them to stop dialysis. You stop dialysis, you're going to be gone, and you're going to suffer pretty bad. But why can't we do both? Why can't we do hospice care and dialysis? Any thoughts around why the government hasn't changed that?
Yeah, I don't have thoughts on why the government hasn't changed it. But I mean, it's pretty clear that their utilization of the emergency room and the hospital in the last, year of their life is astronomical. And it's not necessarily that dialysis isn't allowed on hospice care. It is. It's a matter of relatedness. So if the treatment of end-stage renal disease is related to their prognosis, then hospice is required to pay for everything related. And it's just cost prohibitive, within our current payment model because dialysis is quite expensive. And so, one avenue that is discussed in our circles is, some sort of a contracted lower cost dialysis model so that hospice can, more easily afford to bring the patients on and then slowly work towards, the goal of coming off of dialysis. Either contracted directly through dialysis centers or, maybe even CMS, but it would definitely require a higher rate for those patients in order for hospices to be able to be financially able to take on hemodialysis patients. And so that's very difficult. I dream of a day that hospice is more of a tiered approach and that there's, the hospice that we see it now and then, other levels of hospice care for patients that fall in these gaps. There's definitely a case to be made for it, not just in end-stage renal, but in lots of these patients.
I see it all the time, though. I mean, the ones that we look at them constantly, and the patients that are suffering the most likely to pass away in the next 90 days. And almost every one of them have some kind of a kidney failure or end-stage renal disease, and they're saying no to hospice because of dialysis, and it's really sad. I mean, these are real bad, sick, suffering patients that deserve it, and they're not getting it because of that. So, Dr. Mayo, any other thoughts? Are you going to solve this with your Mayo name?
Yeah. I think the VA is one area to look to in terms of a model where they allow for concomitant care, and I think they're ahead of the curve in terms of taking the big picture into account, like you're talking about. And so I think if CMS were to look to the VA for that those patients with advanced renal disease, and even they allow for concomitant care for some patients with cancer too that are still doing chemotherapy and that type of thing, but recognize that hospice is appropriate, and hospice ultimately will affect the quality of care in a positive way, as also ultimately the spend in a positive way. So I think that's a model that we can learn from in sort of advancing, and how you talked about moving the bar upstream a little bit in caring for these folks.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right, what do you think the biggest challenge facing hospice clinicians today is? And then how do we address it? Burnout, retention, engagement. What's the biggest challenges out there today? Mayo, let's go first.
Well, from clinicians, I think, of course, staffing is a huge part of what we do. I mean, that direct care is where the rubber hits the road in terms of providing quality care. And if you can't hire, clinicians, that's makes it very, very difficult, and then puts the burden on those clinicians that you do have. And so I think anticipatory models in terms of staffing is really, really important. Having a strong HR department that can help model and anticipate growth and staff for growth, I think, is really important in preventing burnout. I think the centralization of certain components that aren't necessarily required at a branch level can take those administrative burdens off from the staff and allow them to do the thing that's most important, patient care. I think technology certainly plays a huge role in work-life balance and providing the ability to streamline the things that are the maintenance part of and documentation parts of healthcare, and to allow what we all go into medicine, and why nurses are nurses, and why home health aides are home health aides, and it's to care for people, and chaplains and social workers. And if we can eliminate some of the burdens that they experience and let them do what they love to do, I think that goes a long way towards helping out with burnout.
For sure. Dr. Richter, anything to add there?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything Dr. Mayo said. I think the other thing that we're seeing, with the staffing shortages and the staffing turnover is that there's an urgency to staff the open positions because it is so heavy on the staff that you currently have. And the staff that we're getting, they're not necessarily seasoned hospice clinicians. We get a lot of new grads or clinicians changing fields. And so there's a push to get them in and get them in the car and get them seeing patients to relieve the burden on the staff that is currently there that's been holding the ball. And I think that has led to more turnover because hospice care is hard work. I mean, it's really meaningful work, but it's incredibly difficult work. And if you don't have the skills and the competency, the burnout rate is incredibly high. And so we see a lot of that where they're excited to go and then they get in the field and feel like they don't know what they're doing and feel overwhelmed and then move on. And so that's something that we're focusing really closely on, just really beefing up that initial onboarding and ongoing education to make sure that our clinicians feel really supported and competent in what they're doing so that they can feel confident in the care that they're providing to patients. It's one thing to say, somebody has a nursing degree, let's go put them in a patient's home, or a physician is a physician, so they can just go do hospice. But if they don't know how to do it, they're not going to feel good about the work that they're doing.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's interesting because you take a nurse that's either just graduated from college, they've gone through their clinical trials or, their clinical rotations, or you take someone that's in the hospital and they've been supported with, if you're in ICU or if you're in the ER or wherever, there's people around you all the time. You have a pharmacist, you have x-rays, you have other nurses, you have other doctors. In hospice, I mean, you're going to somebody's home, somebody's inviting you in their home in a rural community, and you're by yourself. Now, sure, Dr. Mayo's a phone call away or Dr. Richter's a phone call away, but you're by yourself, right? You're making decisions. You're dealing with families. You're dealing with pets. You're dealing with, I got on the airplane a couple months ago. I don't know, it's probably 6 months ago. And it was really weird. The guy sitting beside me, the middle seat was open and nobody wanted to sit in the middle seat. And the plane was full. And so I get in there, I'm like, I'm sitting against the window, and He's like, hope you don't mind. I have a reptile with me. And I'm like, what do you mean you have a reptile with you? And I can't a snake on the plane. I'm like, there's a movie about this, but I mean, and then I was telling that story at a conference, and some lady came up to me afterwards, and she's like, yeah, I visited a hospice patient about a year ago. And she's like, I went into their home and they had 9 snakes in the home and they were all out and running around. I'm like, okay, not going to be a good hospice nurse there. I'm out of there. Like, somebody else is taking care of you. But this guy had a snake on the airplane too. And I'm like, what are you doing? The snake on the plane? Like, okay, I'll sit here, but keep that thing in the box. Some people like snakes. I'm not a fan. Let's jump to technology. So Dr. Mayo's he's a tech nerd like me. So he's been studying a lot of this stuff. We've talked a bunch about it. We actually just talked a couple of days ago. What scares you about this predictive analytics stuff? What's exciting about it? And then what actually, keeps you up at night about it? And Dr. Mayo, we'll start with you, but I know Dr. Richter has an opinion here too.
Yeah, I think with tech, I think the only thing that really scares me about tech is, the potential to steer away from being high touch. And I think it's really important, if you're doing high tech, to also remain high touch. And it's the human interface, it's the human interaction, which is why we do what we do. But if tech is there to allow for that and to facilitate that connection, I think that's what we always need to keep in mind. So I'm really excited about the potential for, particularly in documentation, with AI and all the different thoughts that people are having on how to integrate that into healthcare. I know I went to Mayo the other day for a checkup, and the doctor just turned on his phone and we talked, and he said, by the time we're done, 90% of my note will be completed. And so for that type of thing to come to hospice and home care, I think will be a phenomenal thing and allow patients to get the best care. I remember when we first went to electronic medical records, we had this big, computer sitting in the room, and docs were like staring at the screen the whole time, and it was like having a whole nother person in the room. And it was really obtrusive to developing a good relationship and good rapport with the patient. And so that seamless integration of technology, I think, is really, really important. And I think all the things that I've seen so far, like Talking Muse, was really the first time that I saw how technology and data analytics can truly impact the quality of care. And it's made me a believer, if it's done in the right way, how it can help both patients and clinicians in terms of quality.
Sure, for sure. Dr. Richter?
Yeah, thank you. I echo all of that. The amount of time and energy that we spend coaching clinicians on how to document for compliance purposes, and so that the data analytics programs that we have, Muse, we utilize Muse continuously for quality in our organization, but it's so dependent on clinician documentation. And I think of how many hours that I spend talking about how to manipulate your documentation and how to make it compliant and how to tell the story appropriately and how to document decline. And when I could be spending my time talking about what I really want to talk about, which is how to take care of dying patients. So if these technologies bring us back to that and take that off the shoulders of our clinicians, it will improve everything. And so I agree with Dr. Mayo that as long as it keeps us focused on the patient and less focused on our notes, then I think it's the right thing to do 100%. And maybe will bring us back to the spirit of paper charting where all of our hearts belong.
Hey, this is Alex with Steno Health. Our mission at Steno is simple: to improve the quality of life of the post-acute care clinician. Steno uses ethical, compliant AI to capture visits in real time and turn natural conversations into accurate notes and forms. We are clinicians ourselves, and we've designed Steno to never feel like an extra click or an extra burden in your day. The goal isn't to replace anything, but to support you in every aspect of your day so you can spend more time with your patients and still have the energy and freedom to be present with your family at the end of the day.
It's interesting when you start looking at like medications, just as a perfect example. And I talk about this on a lot of these podcasts. I mean, the average hospice patient's on somewhere between 12 and 14 medications. We know that because back in my Aunt Clara days. And if they're on 12 to 14 medications, which means they're taking a bowl of cereal, essentially, of medications. But for a nurse to put those medications into the system at a start of care, it takes 2 minutes for me to do it. And I'm pretty skilled in point care, believe it or not. 2 minutes per med to do it. And so right there's 28 minutes if you're on 14 meds. So that's 28 minutes of my day on a start of care that I just wasted doing paperwork. And why you can't take a picture of those medications and drop them into the EMR, or why they're not automatically pulled from the H&P or the history and physical that we got from the hospital where they discharged from, why we don't have some kind of a thing. I mean, I'm a fan of, you have a bracelet that's on your wrist that, has your whole medical record on there. And, why can't we just scan that at the next, hospice or the next physician or whoever's seeing you, and it pulls up all your information and loads it into their EMR. That's all got to happen someday. I mean, the banking system figured this out. If I had to remember my routing number and account number for every transaction I did I'd be in trouble. But you can have a card in your wallet that you scan and boom, they know where to get your money from and where to take it from. So if the banking system can figure it out, we got to figure it out. But I'm with you. That it's one of the things I hear most is hospice nurses, chaplains, social workers. Like, I love hospice. I love the care. I love what we do. I hate the paperwork. And I just can't stand working at night and on the weekends. And so solving that, I know, is what, Bill Miller from WellSky and Luke Rutledge from Home Care Home Base and, Mike Valentine from NetSmart. All these guys are out there. They're trying to solve this. Everybody has the same problem, and they're trying to fix it. Because whoever solves it first is going to win, right? If it's easier for me to do documentation at Agape Care, every nurse is going to want to work for Agape Care or St. Croix Hospice. So we got to figure that out. I'm super excited about where it's going, though. It's changing so fast. I was with David Jackson at Choice. He was doing a panel, and he's like, you think about contracts, and when you sign, deals, everything's changing so fast, right? It's like buying a new car, and then next week there's a better new car out, and like, okay, it's changing so fast. So I think in 2 years from now, it'll be completely different. I don't think we're ever going to take away the hugs. I think we're still going to need doctors, we're still going to need nurses, still going to need aides. There's not going to be a robot that's going to do hospice care. You still need all that, but we should be able to make things a lot easier for you. We should be able to document eligibility. We should be able to document your CTI or think about, this is one of the, and I created it, so it's one of the dumbest things we did. But in IDG, a clinician has to go read all the other notes of everybody else and write a summary of what's going on with that patient and give it to the doctor. And then the doctor writes his note, makes the orders, updates the plan of care, and then we move forward. All that should be done automatically, right? It all should be just boom. Here's what it. Patients had 5 visits. They had 2 falls. They had 3 med changes. Here's the supplies we're using. Here's the outcomes. Here's their vital signs. Here's where they're declining. Computer systems should be able to solve all that for you. So now we're really just talking about patients. We're not talking about going into reading and doing work. So that's where I think we're headed. How do you see the role of the hospice medical director or the hospice physician? I want to make sure we call them the right things in the next 3 to 5 years, like as carve-ins possibly come in, palliative care and home health and hospice are starting to kind of come together. There's all this talk about a unified payment for post-acute care. Where do you guys see this? Where do you see the role as a physician going in the hospice field? Let's start with Dr. Mayo. Go ahead.
Yeah. I think that, for a long time, the physician's been really considered an administrative component of the team. And I think with what we're seeing with, oversight, the need for increased documentation, I think that, more and more, I think we're going to see things heading towards regional directors or full-time employed medical directors. Just because of the sheer volume of work and the amount of work it takes to complete a compliant note now. And then, on top of that, I think, with initiatives for care like HOPE and for, anything that a agency, develops as an initiative for better care, to be able to disseminate that throughout the organization, I think is going to take more involvement from the medical directors. So I think more and more the medical directors are going to be involved in, education, in, compliance and audits and responding to those. I think they'll be more entwined with those types of operations internally, as well as, direct, patient care. And I think that's where things are headed. I think it's going to be very difficult to corral uh, 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 contracted physicians in the long run to be able to accomplish a lot of those things successfully. And probably that hybrid model is going to be something that we'll see more and more.
Sure. Dr. Richter, anything to add there?
Nothing really to add. I agree that the hybrid model is the only model that really makes sense at this time. The pendulum is swinging when it comes to physicians in hospice care, which is makes me happy. There's no other part of medicine where you would want to be taken care of without a physician involved in your care. And yet somehow in hospice care with the sickest patients that exist, by definition, hospice at some point became a world in which the doctors really only performed administrative tasks, probably out of necessity. But I do think the times are changing, and I think that that's a good thing. And we're on the cutting edge of that. And so it's my job and Dr. Mayo's job to make sure that our physicians are trained and excited for this next part, and that we do have full-time leaders that are dedicated um, to improving the quality of care and making sure that we're compliant as an organization.
Yeah, it's super interesting. You're right. I never thought about it that way, but it is the only thing in healthcare where, I mean, you're being taken care of by chaplain, social worker, nurses, and aides, and the physician's part of it, but is not, in the direct care of it. So you're right. That's cool. All right, talk about that one patient, and don't tell me the patient's name. Don't break any HIPAA rules. But is there that one patient out there that just stands out to you all the time? And I always have a story. And if you guys listen to the April Anthony podcast, she has a great story about a country music artist that she took care of for a long time. That it's a great story. You should hear it. And then David Curtis was telling his story. So do you guys have that one patient that really stands out that makes you think about why you're in this business all the time? And we'll start with you, Dr. Richter.
Yeah, gosh, there are so many patient stories. I'll just talk about the first one that popped into my head when you asked the question, and it dates all the way back to my fellowship when I was 23, so 2 years ago. He was a young guy. He was in his early 50s, mid 50s, and he had a bad cancer. We saw him in our clinic for pain management, and his cancer invaded nerves. It was very difficult to control pain wise. He was in and out of the hospital. I saw him when he was in the hospital. I saw him when he was in clinic. I took phone calls from him after hours. Him and his wife would come in. We had endless talks about his end of life, about what decisions he wanted, how he wanted to live out the rest of his life, and then really managing his pain was a daily battle. And we never really got there with him. And he ended up dying in the intensive care unit. This is going to sound like not a success story. In the ICU, I watched him get CPR. He was in pain the entire time. And I felt like such a failure. I felt like I had failed him. I failed his wife. I never accomplished what I was supposed to accomplish with him. And I felt awful about the whole thing. I had spent almost my entire fellowship program taking care of him. And the day that I ended my fellowship program, his wife came to the hospital and brought me flowers and gave me, I get like emotional talking about it, gave me a bookmark I was moving to California at the time to start my first job. And, the bookmark had the kindest words on it. And I was like, I don't even think I can accept this from you. Like, I don't know that I didn't fail you two. And she said, it wasn't your job to fix it. It was your job to show up. And you showed up every day, tirelessly. And he always felt supported by you, and he always felt like you cared. And it was never our expectation for you to fix it. And that changed the game for me, that this work isn't about fixing it for patients. It's about showing up for patients. When it's hard, when it's not working, that you just keep showing up and you keep trying and you just show up, and their death is going to be what it is. But as long as you never stop caring and you never stop showing up, then you've done the job. And that's what she said. She said, you never turned your back on us. Even when it was hard, you cried with us, you smashed your head up against the wall with us, you struggled with us, and you tried. And do that. You screamed, stop CPR, But, ultimately I take him with me every single day. And I tell that to our staff all the time, that end of life care is never pretty. And it's not, you're not going to show up and hold a patient's hand and, do life review with them every day. Even though a lot of the young nurses think that's what they're signing up to do when they do hospice, that hospice care is messy. Like, life is messy, death is messy, families are messy, pain is messy. And it's not our job necessarily to fix it. It's just our job to show up. So I would say that's probably what has shaped it all for me.
It's a great story. Thank you for sharing that. And thank you for saying that guy was young and in his mid-50s, because I'm in my mid-50s, so I feel young. But some days. Dr. Mayo, tell us your story. I know you have a good one too.
Yeah. So I joined St. Croix Hospice full-time in 2014. And it was really, my wife saying, I'm leaving if you don't join. And about 2 years later, in 2016, we went as a family up to Grand Marais, Minnesota. My father, in his retirement from medicine, was teaching how to weave birch bark baskets at a folk school up in Grand Marais. And we decided as a family we would go up there and learn how to weave these birch bark baskets. He'd been doing it for 30 years, and it was kind of his passion. And so we went up to take this class. And my wife, Marin, she was feeling kind of sick, and she thought she had the flu. So at the hotel, she said, I'm just going to stay back and rest. And so she did. And my girls and I went and took the class. North House Folk School, if you ever are crafty or want to do something, they have awesome classes up there. You can learn how to build your own pine coffin. We didn't do that one, but they have all sorts of different crafts that you can do up there. Anyways, and Tom is actually an excellent birch bark weaver as well. He's made some excellent birch bark rings. But anyways, so we got to the end of the weekend, and we drove home, and she still wasn't feeling well. And I went into hospice on Monday, and she called me. She said, Andy, I'm just still not feeling well. And so she said, go to the urgent care. They'll get you some Tamiflu, and we'll get you feeling better. And she called me about 2 hours later, and she said, yeah, Andy, they said my platelet count is 16,000. I said, that's not right. And so I said, I'm coming home. And so I came home and picked her up, and we put her into the car, and we drove down to the Mayo Clinic and went to the emergency room there. And she, of course, when you go to Mayo, the first thing they do is draw all the blood work again. And we sat for about an hour, and the doctor came in, and he said, I'm really sorry to tell you, but you have acute myeloid leukemia, and you need to be admitted into the hospital. And we were just floored. It was not what we were expecting. And she ended up going into the hospital and went through the first round of chemotherapy and did just great. And she had a bone marrow biopsy again. And they said, we're sorry, but it's the chemotherapy hasn't taken care of it. And we need to do a second round before we can consider bone marrow transplant. And so she went and had the second round of chemotherapy done. And that hit her. It took her ejection fraction, down to 19. And her liver enzymes, shot up. Her lungs filled up with fluid, and she ended up in the ICU on 3 separate occasions, intubated. And but she made it through, and we were hopeful that things were going to head in the direction that we wanted. And as a hospice physician, I definitely didn't want her to be harmed. As a physician and as a father and as a husband, I desperately wanted her to be cured. And we were able to go home after a few months in the hospital. We were able to go home while we awaited the bone marrow biopsy, and went back to the Mayo Clinic for her visit to get the results. And they said, we're sorry, there's just too many mutations, and there's nothing else that we can do. And my wife turned to me and she said, Andy, you have a lifetime. I have 15 minutes left in this world, and I want to go home, and I want to be on hospice. And that's when hospice, St. Croix Hospice, came directly into my life, and most importantly into her life, and allowed her to be at home with all the people that she loved, and allowed me to be a father, and allowed me to be a husband. And I'm so grateful what hospice was able to do for my wife and for my family and for myself. And for 13 months afterwards, I had a chaplain calling and saying, Dr. Mayo, how's your family? How are you doing? Is there anything that we can do? And that follow-up bereavement is, I know, one of the unsung heroes of what hospice does for patients and families. And so that experience of having hospice for my wife and for my family really solidified the importance of really making hospice part of the continuum of care and expanding this great service to all that are able to benefit from it. And it it's not an experience that you hope for, but being in hospice, we're constantly reminded of what's important in life, and it's a very centering profession to be in the sense that we are witness to what people identify as being important, and it's a constant reminder to be focused on the present and things that are important to you in your life.
Very well said. Thank you for sharing that story. And I've heard that a couple of times, and crushes me every time, Dr. Mayo, that I can't imagine what you had to go through, and your poor daughters, and they're angels. I know both of them, and what they had to go through, and dealing with their mom at such a young age. But I mean, you survived it. You figured it out. You're a very blessed man, and I'm super excited for you to share that with the audience. Reminds me of that Guy Fieri. I don't know if you guys know him, the diners, drive-ins, and dives guy. Yeah, that guy. Yeah, exactly. Dr. Mayo. He's on the Joe Rogan show, and I just happened to be listening to it one day, and he was talking about hospices and angels in hospice, and he had an experience where a friend of his or a family member went through it, and he's like, he just called them hospice angels, and it's really cool for me being a technology guy in this business. I know it's great for you guys. This is the only industry where people talk about angels all the time. I mean, these people, people that are taking care of these patients are really our angels, and it's fun. I mean, I hear that over and over and over. And when Guy said it, it kind of dawned on me. I was like, wow, here's this diner, drive-ins, and dive guy who tastes food all over the world is on a show talking about how great hospice is. So it makes me very proud that you guys are part of what you're doing. Let's talk about brand new hospice medical director, somebody that's been recruited that's going to be a hospice medical director. What advice do you have for them, even if they don't work for you? But what advice would you give that person that said, I went to medical school and I'm a family physician, internal medicine, whatever, and now I'm being recruited by a hospice to be a physician, a hospice physician. What advice would you have? Go with you, Dr. Richter, first.
Sure. I guess my advice would be that this is nothing like any medicine that you have practiced before. Um, and so be patient and give yourself grace and be curious and learn everything that you need to learn. Um, the nurses are a wealth of information. They've been doing it a lot longer than you have, so let them guide you. But also be humble. A lot of physicians that have been out of training for a long time, everything is kind of muscle memory at that point. But hospice is really unlike any other field of medicine. And so sometimes that can be a little jarring for new physicians entering into the field, suddenly having to learn how to document again for the first time since medical school, or how to view clinical care, or how to stop medications instead of just prescribing them all day long. And so I always let them know that feeling an existential crisis about their work and like a fish out of water is totally normal, but just give it time. It's good work.
It's super interesting around these deprescribing medications versus prescribing, because I mean, most physicians don't ever deprescribe; they just prescribe, right? And they may say, "Change this one, do this one," but and it's I always hear the story about the when we were in Clara, the patient's family member that calls in and is mad because they can't crush the vitamin that Nana's taken, the multivitamin, because it's too hard, and she's like, "I'm using a hammer on the the countertop." I'm like, okay, Nana could probably stop taking the multivitamin. Let's not crush it. We don't need to spend all of our time doing that. Dr. Mayo, what advice would you give, the new Dr. Hoberman that's coming in?
Yeah, I think the one thing is recognizing that you're part of a team, and part of being a member of that team is supporting the other members, and we're all on a level playing field on the hospice team, and no one component is more important than the other. And I think recognizing that by and large, it's the nurse and the clinicians that are out there in the field providing hands-on care, and to be cognizant of that, and really supporting that team, I think is very important. And I think the biggest thing ultimately is never losing sight that the best interest of the patient is the only interest to be considered, and really keeping that to heart, because it's, again, with all the pressures of regulations and all the pressures of documentation and things like that, it's so important to remember why we're doing this. And we went into medicine to care for people, and to keep that always in mind, I think, is what my advice would be.
It's awesome. And you're such a humble man, Dr. Mayo. I love that you do that. You are a humble man, and it's not what we find in all physicians, and I've worked with a lot of them in my career. So thank you for sharing that. All right, last question, and then I'll let you guys ask me any questions if you have any, but we'll start with Dr. Richter. What do you want your legacy to be when you're done? You probably got another 60 years to work, Doc, but when you're done working, what do you want your legacy to be? What do you want people to remember you as?
Gosh, that's a good question. I think I just want to be remembered as somebody who really, really loved this work and would never shut up about it, which is probably the most accurate description about me. My fellowship director at my last day of fellowship told me there's never going to be enough of you and I. So if you want to do good end of life care, you have to train the other clinicians. It's not about physicians. It's not about you. Teach everybody how to take excellent care of dying people, and then dying people will have excellent care. And so I've always taken that to heart. And so I talk about it to everyone I meet every chance I get, because I think that, it's not just about me and what I can impact. It's about what everybody around me can impact. And so I just hope that that's my legacy, that I just loved it.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Though. I mean, your legacy is, I wanted people to know that I love this business and wanted to share. That's cool. Dr. Mayo, what about you? I mean, you have a hard legacy to live. It's your dad and granddad, and I think your uncle was insurance too, right? Didn't he establish Mutual of Omaha or one of those?
Yeah, my dad worked for Mutual of Omaha for a while as well. Yeah. But the good thing about my legacy is that I had nothing to do with it, and I was just born, and so it's a fun history and it's a fun legacy, and really for me it's just that I had some impact on hospice and help move that needle forward to increase utilization, and other than that I was a good husband, good father, and a good friend, and that's all I really hope for. And yeah, that's simple, but meaningful to me.
Yeah. Well, I know your kids and I know your wife and Cindy, and I know that they all believe that, and they're all super proud of you. You're also a pretty good snowmobile rider. I'll give you that too. You're Dr. Mayo and I have gone snowmobiling together, and believe it or not, I'm a Texan, live in Scottsdale, Arizona, but I do know how to ride a snowmobile, but this guy can ride snowmobiles like nobody else too. So although if I'm Heath Bartness, I'm going to tell you can't do that anymore because it's a dangerous sport. But I mean, we're going 100 miles an hour across a stupid lake on a snowmobile at minus 30 degrees, freezing to death, but it was fun. Well, great. Well, thank you both for joining us. It's always a pleasure to hang out with smart people like y'all. And I think that the industry needs to hear more from hospice medical directors. And, everybody loves their hospice medical director too. It's kind of like their aide. They love their aide. They love their hospice medical director. And I appreciate everything you guys are doing. I know you're making an amazing impact between the two of you, it's over 12,000 patients every single day that wake up on hospice, and every one of those patients is under care of yours of some kind. And I think you guys both for that. And I know your CEOs real well, and I know your CFOs really well, and they love what you guys do every day. And so, thank you for what you are and who you are.
Thank you so much, Tom.
All right, talk to y'all soon. Bye bye.